You're listening to the Surgeons of Horror podcast.
Hello, welcome to the Surgeons of Horror podcast. Its purpose is to dissect and discuss horror films, both old and new. And today we're going to be looking at Clive Barker's Nightbreed. And in particular, we're going to be looking at the director's cut of that version. We'll discuss a little bit more about that as we get into the nuts and bolts of it. And the reason why we're picking this one is because this year it's celebrating its 30th anniversary since the theatrical release of the movie was presented to us. Obviously based on a Clive Barker book that was called Cabal. And Clive Barker himself directed this film, which was his sophomore outing following Hellraiser a couple of years before that. Before we kind of get into the nuts and bolts of things, though, I should introduce myself. I'm the host and lead surgeon for the podcast. My name is Saul Muerte, and alongside me for this podcast is Miles Davies. Welcome aboard, Miles.
Hello, glad to be on board.
Yeah, it's good to have you on this one. And I know that when we were kind of flicking through the list of films that were going to kind of make up season 6, and I kind of banded this one around, you were quite keen again to put your hand up, much like you did with Shocker beforehand, and Deadly Friend. And I think mainly for the same reason, and because you were talking offline to me about how this one was quite a big one for you when you were growing up, that you kind of it really clicked with you. So I'll ask the question: when do you remember the first time you watched it, and what was your initial reaction to it?
The first time I actually watched it, I meant to go and see it at the cinema, and it was when I first moved to Australia back in I moved to Australia in '88. And it came out in '90, and I remember it was everywhere. It was in all the Rolling Stone magazine, all the magazines. So I was like, this is a really odd little film, because the character makeup was amazing.
Yeah.
And so I remember I was meant to go and see it on the big screen, but I never got around to do it. I must have been because I think there was a tiny cinema near me, but I don't think it was showing it. So I must have waited till it came out on video, because then I was working in a video store. Yeah, and that's when I started watching it. And I pretty much would hire the video out every week, and then I read the book, and then I just became obsessed with the film for a while. It's a great little film about sort of it questions who are the real monsters, and it really struck a chord with me of just really subverting that sort of who is the monster thing in that sort of Universal Monsters
absolutely
theme back on its head,
Absolutely. And I guess that's we're kind of jumping around a bit, but essentially the film, and I kind of mentioned this in the preface as well, because we're going to be talking about the director's cut in particular. The original film had a theatrical release, and the backstory of it essentially was exactly that, where I think it was what's the name of the production company? Morgan Creek.
Yeah.
So there was talking about it from a point of view. I was watching some of the extras on the Blu-ray version I had, and some of the actors that were in that were kind of talking about the first time stuff started shifting, and they kind of sensed that things weren't maybe going according to plan as far as what this vision was going to be and what they had intended. When Morgan Creek kind of appeared on set, and that was the key thing they just didn't get. They didn't get that the monsters are supposed to be the good guys in this.
Yeah.
And they're the heart of the movie, and it's humankind that are the monsters. It's that flip on the tail, and they basically kind of turned it around and went, we can't do this. And they started kind of calling more shoots to be made, and really started kind of bastardizing Clive Barker's version of the film. So that by the time it kind of got released and they went to see, the actors and stuff went to see it, it was a very different beast entirely, and they were pitching it as a slasher film. All you have to do is look up the original trailer for the film, and and you kind of get exactly how they were pushing it out. You know.
Oh yeah, it was completely wrong marketing for it. So.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
I didn't know any of the story behind it. So, but as far as I was concerned, you know, what I saw originally for the first almost 30 years until the director's cut came out was actually quite a really solid, tight film.
Yeah.
And I don't think they did too much wrong by it. But, I mean, that's just me. So, it was better the devil you know, really.
Yeah,
so.
sure. You didn't know otherwise. Exactly. That's right. You're just seeing this thing. I mean, like part of, and you've already said this as well, but part of what makes this film so remarkable and something now, I reckon it's been a good, man, it must be over 10 years since I last watched it. And a bit of backstory too. Funny enough, I was working in a video store when I first watched it as well. And hired it out back in the days where we were talking like videotape rentals. And I just started going through the back catalogue of the horror section because I could borrow these films for free at the time, which was pretty wicked. And so I just went through, and this was one of them. And the big thing for me was the effects, the visual effects, and the makeup and the creatures are amazing. Like I'm watching it thinking this could sit so easily in a modern science fiction TV series.
Oh, definitely. I mean, look at the entire Krause people were top of their game, basically. You've got, what's his face? Danny Elfman doing the score. You've got amazing makeup. You've got the concept art done by Ralph McQuarrie from who did all of the Star Wars.
That's
stuff.
right.
But it's just these brilliant film crafts people at the top of the game, just having fun with it. And they looked like they were having a ball because it was something that they probably had never done before, where the monsters were were the good guys. I fucking loved it. I remember just thinking this is just one of the most interesting films I've seen in ages. So
I mean, there's so many kind of people in there, like you were saying, that kind of came through the mix, and it was at a time when you were saying yes, they were having fun, but what part of what really worked is that the way Clive Barker works is that he's a collaborative director. And he will use the skills and the resources of those around him to experiment and have that freedom to kind of create stuff. And there's there's people in there that were part of the makeup department and the effects team who were really young at the time. Brought in to basically backfill because I think it was was it Image were the effects team that were behind it, I think. And they only had about 8 people, but they had to kind of hire in a whole load of other people. And one of them was Martin Mercer, who was looking after the creature effects basically within that. And he was really young at the time, and he would go on to kind of looking after, like recently he's part of the art department for Aquaman, for example. But he's done a whole bunch of stuff from I'm just trying to think more recently. Yeah, that's it exactly. Like he's become a big player, and a lot of them have, like a lot of these young guys that came in have become much bigger in their field. And I'm forgetting one of the names anyway of one of the other guys, but he was basically saying how he learnt his craft on this. And he was given the design work for one of the creatures. And up till then, he worked with Clive, I think, before in Hellraiser, but he was only working on like things like armatures and body parts and things. But he was given like a whole creature, and he was like, oh, all right, cool. And he went into the real nuts and bolts of this stuff and the design work of it, and given that freedom kind of to explore and design them. And then Clive Barker kind of turned around and basically said to him, that looks really good. Now go and make the creature. And then this guy just went, oh, fuck, I've actually got to make this thing. Hadn't even thought that far ahead. He was so involved in the design process. They then had to kind of work out how it was going to work. But that comes back to, like, as I said, that freedom that they were given, and that creativity, and to have fun with it too, like you said. And they were doing lots of things. They were like sticking different things on the people's faces to kind of work and reshape the body and the face, to kind of give it a very different look and feel. It was really, really, really interesting. And I think we'll talk about some of those creatures in particular as we kind of talk about in the narrative. But really, really interesting designs and stuff that come in there.
You know what's funny about this film as well? The amount of directors that are in this film. Because you've got David Cronenberg.
Yes.
You've got a guy, Charles Bade. I think it's Charles Bade, is it? The cop who plays the cop. He's actually a big TV director.
Charles Hayde,
Charles Hayde, that's it.
Yeah.
So he's done some of the biggest TV shows, and he's done a fair few movies as well. Let me look him up.
He was he was an actor as well. Like, I mean, I think he's comes through with Cronenberg too, because I'm pretty sure he was in Altered States. The Cronenberg film. So he's very much in front of the screen as well as behind it.
Charles Hayde did like Iron Will, the Jack London, and he did a stack of TV shows. And Nip Tuck, Sons of Anarchy, shit like that.
So, cool,
Beast. And then you've got Oliver Parker as well, who did The Ideal Husband and Othello and
done a lot of the classic literature stuff. That's right, on screen. That's right.
I think he's made 10
and he's the guy that plays Peliquin in this.
Yes, that's right. So it's really interesting. So I don't know what the actors were like in regards to a writer directing them. So. What was that?
Some of them kind of come back to having worked with Barker before, though. So, like, obviously, the big one being Doug Bradley, who's now playing Pinhead. He plays Lulzberg in this.
Yeah, that's right.
Who is the Moses type character within the group that live in the Nightbreed. And he and Clive formed a theatre troupe. Basically coming out of university, and that's how they initially worked together. And in that group was also Nicholas Vince and Simon Bamford, who are some of the creatures that are in this, and they also play Cenobites in the Hellraiser movies. And Simon Bamford in particular was the guy that played
he's the sailor kid,
that's right. But he plays Butterball in Hellraiser. So Butterball's the big fat one with the shades, and famously with the makeup that was involved, his eye, he couldn't see out from his eyes. They were kind of sealed up. His ears were sealed up because they were actually cut off. They're like in the prosthetics, the ears were made to cut off. So there was no ear hole, no eye hole, no nose hole. All he had to breathe through was his mouth. And so, like, he was constantly having to kind of suck up his saliva because he's trying to breathe and and he had these kind of teeth fitting in there too, so it was just really hard to breathe. So he found it quite refreshing to take on the role of Simon, because he had probably one of the makeup needed out of all the creatures, and he kind of relished rocking up at 6:30 in the morning for a shoot when all these other people had been there since 4 o'clock in the morning.
Imagine.
And interestingly, he only got the role because he kind of heard about the film being made, and he kind of was feeling a little bit gutted that Clive hadn't called him. And he called up and kind of said, I don't suppose there's any roles going for me, is there? And coincidentally, the person that was originally playing that had basically backed out because they had prior commitments that had come in the way. That person was Mark Ormond from Soft Cell.
No way.
Yeah, was originally going to play him.
Wow.
And so that's kind of a bit of interesting moment. So there's a lot of old collaborators, is my point.
That's cool.
Saying.
So clearly he's got a good relationship with his actors.
Yeah, definitely. So much.
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
So and even Cronenberg himself is an actor's director, and he's acted in a few. Like he cropped up in obviously Jason X in one of our podcasts.
That's
cool. A while back. There's a bit of a cameo, but he has acted too, so he has got that niche. And I guess we'll talk about his performance in a bit because it's interesting.
He's brilliant in this.
Yeah,
it's a great role. I think it's hard because it's like there's so many good. They all have a lot of fun with their characters. There's never a fault in any of the characters. You don't go, fuck, they're completely unbelievable. Everybody looks like they're able to play this role, that they're in.
And what I really loved about it too is the Nightbreed characters are so rich. There's so many of them. The town feels real, like this underground, town.
The
set design was amazing, and really kind of really a strong image, and obviously a depiction of basically Clive Barker's visual combined with the effects team and the set designers all collaborating together to create Midian, the town. And I did, as I was watching the director's cut recently, I was sitting there going, this could so easily make a really cool TV series. Right? I could see it really, really doing well. And apparently last year, 2018, Sci-Fi talking about doing a development of the series, and I don't think it's gone anywhere since then. But it'd be interesting to see if that does pick up or not.
Yeah.
Especially if the 40 years coming up that we're celebrating, whether we will get an announcement or something.
Yeah. I don't know. I like the film too much. I don't think you could probably recreate it unless you. I think I know it's probably skipping ahead, but I always felt that there was more to these adventures. Yeah, I've been waiting for a sequel to the book. So many years that you just kind of go, is it ever going to happen?
Yeah,
I feel like that's the beginning of an adventure, the beginning of the prophecy, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's how I felt when I was rewatching it again, because I was just like, it just reawakened a lot of the stuff that I originally felt. And like I said, it's been 10. I reckon it may have even been more than 10 years, that I watched this last. So a lot of these kind of old thoughts were coming to my head. It made me. Prior to this, I reread the book Cabal again. I've got to get that fresh in my head, and I'll probably talk about pockets of that as we go through the narrative. But the other thing that kind of stirred me was exactly that. I was just like, God, why isn't? And I had to look it up and go, there hasn't been a sequel written.
No,
we double check it, and no, there hasn't. And it's not like he has deviated away from writing kind of these a series of books, because he has done. He's done it with the Arabat series. He's done it with a few other things as well. Why he's not picked it up? Because I had the same thing. You kind of want to see that journey continue. You want to see them, as you said, we have jumped ahead, but you want to see them rebuild as a group again, and
exactly,
and come together.
It feels like an origin story of a prophecy, like a superhero, like an anti-superhero, because the Boone character ends up as the hero of the bunch, basically, with being granted these sort of powers, essential superpowers, essentially. Yeah, and also a gift from Baphomet, and it's like, and he's holding that, so he's like, and he's holding this group together. So I feel like there was something. This is the beginning of it feels like an origin story. So,
I agree.
I haven't had it. I mean, I had to wait for 20 years however long for the Unbreakable.
You were going for that.
You never know.
It might happen. Although, Clive Barker's not been in the best of health of recent years, so it'll be interesting to see. Like he had a series where I think it was his polyp. He had polyps or something that had to be removed, and it was a botched job, and so there was like this poison that got out during the surgery. and it nearly killed him. So like he was pretty much on death's door and managed to pull through, thankfully. And that kind of reinvigorated him to kind of try and write this book. He just was like, I need to get this book out. And I don't think we've yet to see that yet, but he's obviously on a bit of a spiritual journey of himself at the moment, having gone through such a traumatic time. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see, you know, what does come about and whether or not we do get to see Cabal return or not. Yeah. So, all right. So look, as I said, there has been various kind of cuts. So we did mention the theatrical cut, and then back in like 2009, there was a Cabal cut that kind of came out, and then now we're talking about the Shout Factory kind of restored it and released what was the director's cut, which we're going to be going through. So we're going to talk around the narrative. We are basing it on the director's cut. And I'm going to kind of, as I said to you off record, and I'm relying on you here, Miles, to kind of help me pave the way forward, because I only watched the director's cut fairly recently. And I'm a lot of my memories more on the original theatrical cut. So as much as the director's cut is fresh in my mind, I may kind of end up missing bits. So bear with me.
That's right. I mean, I don't want to diss the director's cut, but the original cut's probably better than the director's cut anyway.
Yeah,
it certainly is a tighter film, and as a you know, edited wise, it's a lot sharper, and it flows a lot more. I feel like the extra scenes that they injected into the director's cut almost didn't really need to be there.
Sure,
they were. Some of them were a little cheesy, and then some of them were just a bit indulgent. And some of them just reiterated exactly what was going to happen next. So it was just
that's true. That is true. And I guess, like, if anything, it was just more that the ending wasn't so
ambiguous.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that was the key thing for me when I was watching. It was a bit more apparent as to what was going to become of the monsters.
Because that whole, I mean, the ending is in the book. The ending where he bites her and she becomes part of it. It's all in the book anyway. So
that's right. Yeah.
I mean, I always knew that anyway, but it was just like the way I don't know. I think the way they executed it in the director's cut was very cheesy.
Yeah, sure.
I don't know whether it was just because they didn't have the finished effects, or it just felt a bit sort of, I don't know. It was just something a little bit sort of gone with the windish about it.
Yeah. I mean, it helps that they're on that. I mean, it's in both versions, but it helps that they're on that kind of hill with the sun setting or sun rising.
Yeah. But apparently, I mean, talking about versions, apparently there's another one coming out next year.
Oh, really?
With an extra, it's an extra hour of footage.
Get out.
I'm like, what in the fuck are they putting into it? They're just putting every single rush into it.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm at some stage they're just going to just leave it alone. If they use the extra footage as added special features or something on the disc. But yeah, just leave it.
Actually, you know, that's put me on to something as well. I should probably give a big shout out to the guys behind the Hellraiser podcast. If you haven't called it, go check it out. These guys are awesome, and they're not just about Hellraiser. They talk everything about Clive Barker, and they've gone through the different versions. I'm pretty sure they've done a Cabal cut and a director's cut of their podcast as well. No doubt when this new version comes around, they'll do one on that as well. But they kind of live and breathe Barker. So so go check that out. I mean, obviously we're going to be coming at it from just purely looking at the film 40 years, it's added 10 years, 30 years on from the original release, and whether it's still strong, and, you know, and our reaction to it from then and now and stuff like that. That's our narrative as we go through it. So whereas they go more into kind of like the nuts and bolts of the effects team, they'll go and talk about the intricate details of that. So if you haven't heard of Nightbreed and you want to check it out a bit more, do go check out the podcast that they do too, because you might get a bit more of a deeper discussion from them. As such, we're going to kind of, as I said, crunch through this one. So let's look at the narrative. And already, like, this is the thing I found, that the difference between the book and the film straight from the get-go. And it's always hard when books are, you know, told from the point of view from the characters, that certain reveals don't happen until a certain point or a certain stage in their storyline. But because it's Filmland, we need to kind of cut through that a bit quicker. And we get introduced to Decker, like the Dr. Decker, played by David Cronenberg, really, like, pretty much from the very beginning.
Yeah.
And already you can and it's him narrating a little bit, but you already know he's the bad guy. Like, he's so his performance is so reserved, head back, and with no hint of emotion at all.
No, he's pure psychopath.
Yeah, and that comes across, so you just know straight away that, oh, this guy's pretty messed up. Whereas in the book, the reveal of that doesn't happen until a lot later on. It's still early on. It's still within the first. It's basically split into 4 or 5 parts from memory, and it's still within the first part that kind of occurs. But there's a few chapters before it kind of, you get that, oh, hold on, this guy isn't all he's cracked up to be. Because the concept of it is Boone, Aaron Boone, played by Craig Sheffer. He's our protagonist, and he's led to believe that there's been a bout of serial killings that have been going on, where families have been basically butchered and killed and eviscerated in the most gruesome way possible. And I'm talking like kids too, not just, you know, adults.
Readers, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. And he's, in the way the book unfolds, he's in a counselling session with Dr. Decker, and we're led to believe, or Decker is insinuating, that Boone is responsible. Yeah. And there's a bit, and it's never touched on his back history in either book or film, but it's to the point where he's had episodes of some kind before where it is believable that he could potentially have been responsible for these things, right? So it's not just a case of, you know, the doctor kind of just randomly picking somebody. There's merit to it because he has these blackouts and things he can't remember when, and things are happening to him. So and he has
clearly there's, I mean, he's gone to Decker.
Yeah. And
Decker's obviously planted a whole bunch of stuff in his brain anyway to make him feel like he's not quite right.
Yeah.
Now, he's clearly been having these dreams about Midian for ages.
Absolutely.
So it was always going to happen. Like, this prophecy was always going to happen.
Yeah.
Yet, you know, like anything supernatural, in any supernatural movie, you kind of, whenever you present the supernatural of, I've seen this, no, you're crazy.
Yeah.
So that's probably why he's been to the psychiatrist. And then Decker clearly has some kind of weird fixation / love for Boone, but really wants to. There's an obsession here, and he's not like, he could quite easily just kill Boone, but he wants to play games with him.
Yes, he does.
And he wants to have fun with him, so he's really found a victim that he just wants to fuck with, basically.
Yeah.
And it's almost like, it almost feels slightly sexual in a way.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And even the climax of the movie hints at a sexual confrontation between the two.
Well, I mean, look at the way that he's killed.
Exactly, that's my point. Yeah, exactly.
Heart to heart.
A long spiky thing to impale you with. Yeah, exactly. That was exactly where I was going with that. and it is a climax.
But
it literally brings the house down. Yeah. All right, moving on. Enough of the dad jokes. So look, there's a lot to that. But do you know what? As I was rewatching it, I was falling in love with the Decker character all over again. I love this character. I think he's one of the most fascinating villains to ever be on screen. And a lot of that is testament to the way Cronenberg just underplays him in a massive way. Everything's just so stripped back.
Definitely.
And it makes it even more evil. And even the mask.
It's the less is more, isn't it? It's like
totally.
The less he gives, the more you get out of it.
Yeah.
And as you said, the mask, it just completely shuts off everything, but it's such a fucking crazy mask.
It's a crazy mask. It's got it looks kind of a bit like one of those potato sacks that have been kind of really weirdly stitched up together. It's got these buttonholes for eyes. And one zip that's crooked and off to the side a little bit, which is where the mouth is. It's crazy. And in the book, this isn't demonstrated so much in the film, but in the book, the mask almost has a life of its own.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and
I remember that now. That was one of the most interesting things about it, was that he actually was a character.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
The mask was driving him. He had to put this mask on to become this other person.
That's right.
And he went into great detail with it. And it spoke to him as well, from what I understand. But it's really fascinating. The sort of the depths they go into, and that's what he said. It said that every character is really rich.
Yeah,
some of them are more rich than others, and this one is just like it's so detailed. Yeah.
Yeah, and then and this is the other thing I was coming through it, when I was watching this, Barker only has ever directed 3 films. A lot of that was down to the bad experience that he felt he got through dealing with the film business, essentially. Obviously, we know about Hellraiser. We're talking about Nightbreed, and his 3rd film would be Lord of Illusions, which would come a few years after this, 95, I think, from off the top of my head, but I could be wrong. And they're all visually rich, and it makes me want. I want him to do more. I
definitely.
sit there going, I love this guy's brain, and he's an artist. You see it in the way he talks, but even he's an artist. He actually is an artist. I'm not just talking. The big umbrella artist, he actually does artwork that you can look up, and he sells these paintings and things, so he's well and truly tapped into that medium. Clearly has a fascination with the body and the destruction of the body and the mind within his work too, and this self-deprecation thing that goes on too is quite integral to a lot of the characters that we see. Probably none more so than the Boone character, who is so defeated and defeatist with the world, and he's basically held up with a crutch by the Laurie character, his girlfriend.
So Boone's an artist in this, isn't he? He's some sort of weird sort of sculpture.
Well, he's supposed to be he's tipped as being an. I think he was tipped as. Oh no, hold on, I'm confusing him with Narcisse. Sorry. Yes, you're right. He is meant to be an artist of some kind. Yeah. Sorry. The Narcisse character who we meet in a bit is supposed to be an actor.
That's right.
So sorry, that's where I was getting confused for a second. He is meant to be of some kind. Has this artistic background.
Because you even did that in the movie with the staircases made out of old exhausts. Because he's working in a garage and he's doing work. So he's obviously, I reckon he's made that staircase himself. I don't know. It's a subtle little thing that if you don't really note it, you have to actually look further into each of the characters to get more out of them.
Yes.
Which it doesn't actually spell everything out for you. It just gets to ask you to look closer.
Yeah. Yeah,
it's quite interesting.
yeah, and even like so the Laurie character who we share the journey with, essentially. Like also again in the book than in here, but every time what basically she's our human angle, essentially. And she's the heart of the film. She's, as I said, she's that crutch and support for Boone whenever he finds things are just too much, you know. And she's also the one that has to embrace the monster in all of us, by accepting the monster in Boone. And I know I'm jumping ahead again, and essentially accept the monster in herself, which again, jumping ahead to the very end. So I found her, like I said, like you just said, mate. Like this, the characters are so good in this. You know, I as a former actor myself, I do kind of watch this and go, it would have been so awesome to be involved in this film. And I can see why someone like Simon Bamford, who we were talking about earlier, was just chomping at a bit to be involved. Yeah, and fortunately was. It's a great film, and a great story. So we kind of meet. We know that Decker's he's going to be the villain. We know that Boone's going to be the good guy, and will drive the film through. And as I said, has Laurie by his side to kind of help him get to his end goal and fulfill the prophecy, essentially. And this is a point where Boone has been deliberately feeding. Wrong way around. Decker has been deliberately feeding Boone drugs that are kind of laced with LSD, so that he has these illusions, and he does that so that Boone does doubt himself, so that and kind of goes into these crazed moments, and basically Decker uses that so that he will then go off on a killing spree himself. And so that when Boone wakes up the next day and, you know, these things that have happened, that's why he questions, I have no memory of what I was doing. That's because it's coming out. And so it's during one of these moments that he goes and sees Laurie performing in some kind of club. She's a singer. So again, marries with that kind of artistic kind of
which is it's not in the original theatrical cut, so the singing, the whole song is an extra feature in which is, you know, it was a bit of a shame. She's got a great voice.
Yeah, she has. It's not a bad song either.
Imagine if you sung your fucking guts out and they went, no, sorry, you've been cut. It's been like fucking American Idol of the horror world, isn't it?
Yeah. That's it. But so we have that kind of moment, and I may have missed a bit too, but because during that he then goes off, but he's having these this kind of trip, and it's basically him kind of making love to her.
That's right.
With the most tidiest white undies that I've ever seen a man wear. It's pretty special. Only Craig Sheffer could pull that off, I think. It's pretty good. And speaking of which, like, Craig Sheffer is pretty ripped in this. Like, he works out.
He's funny. Like, I mean, I'd only ever seen him in like a series of he was in Weird Science before that, I think. And so he always played what was it? No, Some Kind of Wonderful.
Oh, that's it. That's right. Yeah,
so he played a dick in that, basically. So I'd seen him in it was something else.
He was in The River Runs Through It.
That was after I saw that afterwards.
Okay.
I think years later that he did that, which was also, it was really very good in that.
Yeah.
But it was in, That Was Then, This Is Now. I don't know if you ever saw that. It was based on an essay Hinton. The lady who wrote The Outsiders and Text. She did a movie called That Was Then, This Is... Oh, she wrote a book called That Was Then, This Is Now, and it was Craig Sheffer and Emilio Estevez and Morgan Freeman. One of Morgan Freeman's first films.
Oh, my God.
And it was really good. I just rewatched it recently, and it's
you have to check it out.
Movie. He plays like a good guy in this as well. But he's too dodgy boys, teenage boys, basically.
Sure.
But yeah, very cool. But yeah, he was like, and so he brought an edge to the Boone character. I just love the way he answers the phone. It's Boone. It's Boone.
Yeah, he can't.
It's such a weird way of answering a phone. It's Boone.
It's Boone. Yeah, he every so often he brought the ham. I have to admit, So and other times he was incredibly quite strong in it too. So
he's good. Obviously it lent itself to bringing out the ham every so often.
Yeah.
So he could have a bit of fun with it. But,
yes.
I thought he was really good. I think this is probably one of his best roles that he ever did, actually.
Yeah, I agree. I have to agree with that, actually. I mean, he's not done massively outside of that late 80s, early 90s period, which is
a shame, because he's actually a solid actor. He is. Yeah. I don't know, he must have a shit agent or something. You see these actors and they just kind of end up with these really shit agents. Brendan Fraser's the same. Brendan Fraser ended up with and just disappeared off the face of the earth. And same as Ralph Macchio as well, and just disappeared off the face of the earth. And it only got resurrected recently when in the Juice, the David Simon HBO series.
Yeah, that's right.
And with Cobra Kai as well. But there must be a stream of these like really solid actors just getting fucked over by shit.
Yeah. Interesting, isn't it? We good for him to have a resurgence. It's like I was watching. So the Blu-ray I've got, the director's cut, I want to say came out 5 years ago for the 25th anniversary. I'm pretty sure that was the version I've got. His interview, he's talking in that then. And as I was watching that, there is, and you could just laugh at me with this, but I was watching his face and thinking, you could mistake him as like a brother or a cousin of James Brolin very easily.
Oh, easily. No, sure.
Very similar kind of bone structure and facial features. I was kind of going, could easily pass for him if you weren't aware of. I mean, obviously, Brolin's been a bit more in the public eye lately.
Yeah.
But if you weren't really aware of him so much, you'd be like, you could easily mistake the two, I would have said.
Definitely.
But I was just like, I could see that. So maybe get them cast as brothers and something.
yeah, definitely.
Okay, so he's under Decker has drugged basically Boone. Boone goes wandering off into the street where he gets struck by a truck and taken to hospital. In the film, it's very much a mistake. He's just kind of wandering out into the street. In the book, he thinks he has killed these people and so distraught by the fact that he is responsible for killing a family and these young kids that he tries to kill himself. So a very big difference between the two. He survives it barely, and as he's in hospital, and then we get introduced to this Narcisse character. Narcisse is this kind of. But what draws him to Narcisse is, and Narcisse is played by Hugh Ross as well, who I'm pretty sure is one of the theatre group as well that I was telling you about with Barker and Doug Bradley. So he what draws Boone to Narcisse is that he hears Narcisse talking about Midian and ranting and stuff, and he's just like, hold on, that's Midian. I know, obviously it's this mythological town. Why is this guy talking about this thing that he's been dreaming about?
Exactly.
And basically Narcisse is saying that he thinks he knows how to get to Midian, and he knows a way of finding the hidden city. And he basically tells Boone how to get there. And he thinks Boone is sent to test him. And in doing so, he's like, I have to perform some kind of act. So then he starts to basically rip the skin off his face.
He shows him his true face,
Yeah, that's right. Before, obviously, like the staff kind of hospital staff pile in. And then we get the scene where Boone escapes, but not before seeing Decker at the other end of the corridor.
Yeah, that's right.
Off. So there is that moment where we go, okay, like they're definitely setting this up. Like, you know, this is the yin and yang. This is hero against villain. These two are going to be facing each other at the very end. But Boone escapes essentially, and he decides to make his way to Midian and find out where this city is. Which, when he gets there, is just essentially it's just a huge graveyard that's just in the middle of nowhere. And
it's an old is it an old gold miner's graveyard? Is that what it is?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So essentially, beforehand was and the book shows it a bit better too, because there is
that's right.
There is an empty town essentially that's gutted out. No one lives there anymore, and the cemetery itself is raised up on a hill a bit behind the town. But the way it's presented in the movie, he turns up and it's just a graveyard essentially. There's nothing there. And that's where he comes across two characters. He comes across Pelequin, who we mentioned before, is played by Oliver Parker. And he also meets Kinski, who is played by Nicholas Vince, who I mentioned earlier as being one of the... I'm pretty sure he played the Chatterer in one of the Cenobites in Hellraiser. And Kinski's the guy. I'm pretty sure he's the one with the moon face in this.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
And so he meets these characters, and Pelequin basically looks like a dreadlocked kind of dude with very red skin, essentially. And they're both Pelequin is pretty much a vampire, essentially, is the way it's played off, right? But not that we
or some kind of meat eater.
Yeah,
meat for the beast.
He goes, he's meat.
Meat for the beast.
And that's not a sexual innuendo at all. So just give me your meat. And the interesting thing with this is that Boone is still convinced. The reason he's gone here is because he knows that there's this mythical creatures possibly exist, that these are monsters. He's not afraid of these creatures that present themselves before him, because they're really not of this world. And he's so convinced that he's evil that he should, by default, become part of their group. Yeah. And Pelequin's the one that basically says, "No, I know evil when I see it or smell it." And
I think he reads his mind, because he goes, because he flashes and you see his eyes flash, and then he goes, "He lied to you, asshole."
That's right.
You know? So he actually can see what's actually happened.
Right.
So I think there's a psychic connection between.
Okay, that makes sense.
I don't know. Or he actually is telepathic in some way.
Yeah. No, I like that. That's cool. That gives that character even more depth, if that's the case. And he basically just says, "Nah," like he said, "Who told you that?" And he's like, "Decker."
Yes.
And he's like, "Well, he lied. He's an asshole," like you said. And
he doesn't actually say Decker. He just says, "Who told you that?" And then he does, as a rhetoric question, and he says, "Well, he lied to you, asshole."
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, my problem. Yeah. That's right. We read between the lines. We know Decker's the one that's told him.
Yeah.
So at this point here, he's just thinking, what the fuck? What is actually going on? Boone is. And then at which point Pelequin basically takes a big bite out of his shoulder. He's able to kind of wriggle free because for some reason Kinski kind of delays the process, doesn't he?
Yeah, I think he fights him off or something.
Yeah. And then
it's against the rules or something.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. You can't do that. It's breaking the rules. And basically, he's the one that intervenes and gets Boone to run off. He says, "Just get beyond the gates, get out the cemetery gates, and you'll be safe." And he does so, but obviously he's been bitten, and obviously this plays on the vampire mythology because he turns as a result. Because of the actions of Pelequin biting him, but as he comes out of the gates, that's where he comes face to face with the police.
Yes, and Decker.
And Decker's there. Interestingly, there's a new character that comes in this one, because the way the book's written, the main kind of cop is the sheriff, the Captain Eigenman, which is played by Charles Hayde.
Yeah.
Charles Hayde. Oh yeah, so that was the other thing. I know we've spoken to him about him as being a director, but for me, he was always Hill Street Blues.
Yes, right.
And and I've forgotten. Frank. Yeah, that's right. And yeah, so he was always that in my head, and it was interesting seeing him playing that in this. But anyway, backtrack. Sorry. So Charles Hayde plays Eigenman. So in the book, he's the main cop that is pursuing this, and and they do it here too a little bit, where he at first is so focusing on fame and the glory of this discovery of Midian and these mythological creatures.
Yeah.
And the one responsible to bringing down, no, not that verse, sorry, backtrack again. He was responsible for bringing and gunning down Boone, who's this serial killer that's been on loose. And he's just so wrapped up in fame with that he doesn't, but Decker at that point wants Eigenman to go back and basically obliterate Midian and destroy it, because he realizes there's evil there, and he wants to kind of destroy that for his own glory, essentially. So I'm jumping around a heck of a lot, but my point is there's only one kind of cop character. But in this, we're first introduced to Detective Joyce, who is played by Hugh Quashie. Now he cropped up as Captain Panaka in the Star Wars prequel trilogy.
Yes.
He was also in Highlander as well.
Highlander.
Yeah.
Yes.
He's one of those faces you just kind of know. You see him and go, "Oh, it's that dude."
I think in the Bill once as well.
Yes, that's right.
I think he's based out of England, so he's an American guy that's gone to England and found steady employment.
So yes, exactly. And so he interestingly, they merged the two characters a little bit. And the way the movie plays out, for a moment you think maybe he's going to be a good cop, but he's not really. And we'll get to that when we get a little bit later on. But yeah, they essentially kind of almost split the two cop characters. I
felt the Hugh Quashie character, it's almost a little redundant, his character. I felt that it was just nothing.
Yeah.
The rest of that's the thing. The rest of the characters are so rich, they're so detailed, that you don't really get too much from him. He just seems quite inept.
And that's because he's a tack-on. For some reason, they decided to split the Eigenman character in two. Narrative of a normal cop, I guess, picking up the hunt for this serial killer. And cut to the captain character, Eigenman character later on. Whereas essentially in the book, it's the captain's the one that follows that journey the whole way through it. So it was a bit, like you said, I completely agree with you, and that was kind of where my point was going to go with that. Is it feels a bit redundant, which is a shame because the guy's a good actor too.
Yeah, exactly.
So anyway, so we have the scene where Boone kind of crashes out of the cemetery gate. He's confronted by Decker and the Quashie cop character and a bunch of other cops, and Decker kind of goes to confront him and chats to him and basically kind of has that one-on-one conversation. And he sees this as an opportunity to destroy Boone. And in doing so, he's then going to get out of Kansas because he's realizing the heat's starting to get on. People are getting a bit tired around these serial killers. And he's just going to start from scratch again, rebuild himself up, and then start killing again in a very different town and city in America elsewhere. That's his plan. So he has Boone where he wants him. He shouts out, he's got a gun, dives out the way, and then Boone just gets kind of completely gunned down. And then the Quashie character comes out and goes, "Where's the gun?" And he goes, "He was reaching into his pocket." So we think, if you haven't read the book at this point, we think Boone's dead at this point. Basically, this gets a bit confusing because they do a bit of a cross between the girlfriend Laurie character coming to view the body as at the same time as we see the body being taken down into the morgue downstairs.
Yeah.
And it is meant to be like a before and after stuff that's happening at the same time, but I felt like it didn't really work in this. I don't know about you, but I found that scene didn't make sense in viewing. It felt like it was happening at the same time, but it wasn't.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But anyway, so it evolves that he wakes up in the morgue and he basically does a runner.
Yeah.
And he feels like, he's supposed to be dead. He's been riddled with bullets. And he decides to go and find Narcisse to kind of work out what the fuck's happened.
Yeah.
And go back to Midian and kind of work out what's happened. And so, and then when the cops go down, they just think somebody's stolen the body. And taken off with it. Obviously, they don't expect him to be the Walking Dead and has escaped off his own accord. So we then kind of see the journey take place with Boone arriving at Midian, and he finds Narcisse, and he's basically inducted into the group.
He has his like baptism and
the
hand and the religious induction.
That's right, and this is where we meet Lalsberg, which is Doug Bradley's character for the first time, and he's completely unrecognizable. If you look at how Bradley actually looks, the makeup is amazing in this. For his character in particular, is really really good, and he looks nothing like the character in Pinhead either. And on that note, I was in the extras. I was watching with Doug Bradley's interview talking about the making of this. He said there was basically like about obviously there's a couple of years in between Hellraiser and this one, but it was sandwiched in between with Hellbound, the sequel to Hellraiser. So he had. And everything where that was shot was in Pinewood Studios, where this was shot too. And so not only was it the same location, it was pretty much the same crew. There was a lot of the same actors that were involved. Obviously, Clive Barker was coming. He didn't do the second film, but he was in the first film, directing Hellraiser. But a lot of that was the same. And he said for him, he went literally from playing Pinhead in the sequel, where he would turn up around 6 a.m, rock up, go into make in the same chair, same artist, sit in the same chair, sit down at 6 a.m. and get his makeup done, or then rolling onto exactly the same film set as well for the location of the studio. And he said the problem with that though is that he found it really hard to shift from Pinhead to Lalsberg at points because he had so become integrated into that, like a habit and ritual of that process of, going through that motion to then prepare himself for Pinhead. And because he was repeating exactly the same stuff in the same location, he had to kind of, on occasion, just go, wait, no, reset. I'm not Pinhead here. I'm Lalsberg. So I can see that would being quite a difficult thing to do because as an actor, you transport yourself into the role, and a lot of that is the build-up beforehand, before the cameras start rolling, or even before you step foot on stage. There's a process beforehand that you go through. So, it would have been quite difficult for him, I can imagine. But we do get to meet him. He is kind of tipped as like the leader of this group. He said that he played it a bit like Moses, which is why I mentioned the Moses thing beforehand. In the sense that he's there to do God's will, and in this case, the God character being Baphomet, this deity that lives like deep in the underground, and he is there to carry out his will essentially and lead this group of misfits known as the Nightbreed. And Boone gets initiated into it, as you said, with this kind of baptism. that takes place, and he has to touch the blood of Baphomet in order to know whether or not he is accepted, and he is. At the same time this is all happening, Laurie goes on a journey herself, and she feels like really bewildered. Like she doesn't get the chance in the film, doesn't get the chance to really say goodbye to him, but also suddenly learns that he's this serial killer from her point of view, and is so out of character from what she knows of this person that she loves, and she's trying to come to concept of the fact that how could she love somebody that has this hidden personality to him, and not only that, a personality that's so dark and twisted. And so she's questioning herself, and she goes on a drive, basically goes to drive, and she wants to go to where he was shot and killed, just to try and find that peace within herself. And she turns up at this. Yeah, go on.
I mean, he's talked about Midian for so long with her anyway. And then suddenly when she goes, "Oh, where was he found?" and they say Midian, she's like, "What?"
Yeah.
Like you can see her going, that place actually exists.
Yes.
Like this weird fantasy dreamland of his.
That's right.
So I can see her being like, there's some kind of curiosity going on there with her.
Yeah.
For trying to find out what in the absolute fuck is going on, you know?
Yeah.
And the fact that body's gone missing as well is just weird. So she's obviously got her own journey that she's going on to find out what in the hell is going on, what is reality essentially. So
yes. So excuse me. So when she goes on, she basically is she's going through all these emotions, as you said. She's very confused with the emotions that she's feeling. She turns up at this place, and we see her in a bathroom where she meets this other woman called Cheryl Ann. And she's Laurie's in tears, and she talks about the actress who plays Laurie, who I should probably check her name actually, which is pretty bad. It's Anne.
Sorry, Anne Bobby.
That's it. Yeah, thank you. And she's she talks about how I think she was going through I think her grandfather had passed away or something along those lines. So she was actually going through a bit of a grieving process herself at the time. And when in that scene, all of a sudden she was just really struggling, and like the tears were genuine tears, because it just tapped into something. And she just spoke about how Clive, she said at the time she didn't realize it, but in hindsight she realized how delicate and professional Clive was in giving her that space to feel that emotion without questioning or dictating her in any way. Just kind of allowed her to go through that, and she said that, and she really praises him for that empathy that he showed in that instance, which says a lot about him as a person, I think. Right, so dark kind of stuff. That he interestingly was really empathetic to her needs at that point, and just listened to her and helped her guide through that process. But anyway, so the point is that the character Laurie meets Cheryl Ann, and they basically cut to them drive. They kind of make friends, and they drive to this cemetery together. But there's a whole chunk before this, they hang out a lot in the book. There is a lot more to Cheryl Ann's character, and it's a bit of a blink and you miss it kind of role. And it's quite important because it's how Decker is clearly still on the scene and following Laurie at this point, because he's equally infatuated with her, and the connection Boone had with her.
Yeah, for sure.
And we don't get to see that until the reveal, obviously, because, I'm jumping ahead again, but Cheryl meets this mysterious figure who in the film, it's done really well because you don't see who it is. You just see this guy, the barman, say, Kurt brings a drink over, says courtesy of the man by the door.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's a bit of a throwaway moment, but obviously it's, as we learn, it's Decker that's there. And And what he does to her in the book is pretty horrific.
Yes.
And Laurie's discovery of Cheryl Ann is equally horrific. But we don't really touch on that so much in the film. But anyway, jumping ahead, because the two of them turn up at the cemetery in Midian, and Cheryl Ann kind of gives her that moment to be on her own, Laurie to be on her own, and Laurie then finds this kind of wolf creature that's kind of lying, looking like it's really hurt and bruised, and it's creature effects that's done, puppetry essentially, and it was all controlled by these guys that were doing it remotely, and she was interacting with it. We're talking pre-CGI, excuse me, and this is where she bends over and she kind of, cradles it, picks it up, and then we see that she's been observed by a woman in this doorway, who basically kind of says, bring her to
me, bring her
to me, and as she kind of goes in, it's kind of like a crypt, essentially, isn't it? Is where she's going into. Yeah. And she, as
transforming,
this creature starts transforming, and then it turns into this little girl.
Yeah.
So we then get introduced to shapeshifters. Essentially, is what we're seeing.
Affected by daylight. Yeah,
that's right. And again, it's the sunlight. Is kind of their enemy. Essentially, it's cold. And that plays a lot in the book as well.
Yeah. Yes, definitely.
These creatures have to live underground and in the shadows. And this. So basically, we're seeing the mother and daughter, and the mother character is called Rachel, and the daughter's name is Annette. And Laurie kind of knows that something's at play here, and so she's asking Rachel, "Is Boone there? Is he with you?" But she doesn't reply. And Lounsburg turns up. Along with Peliquin, and they basically kind of scare her off.
Yeah.
This is played differently in the book too. It's like we never really, from Laurie's point of view, she never, like Lounsburg hangs back in the shadows of this stairway, essentially, and we never see his face, but he pretty much comes out into the space here and she sees him. So they definitely play that in a different way, which I thought was an interesting take. So then she kind of runs off, scared about what she's seen, and again thinking, what the fuck is going on? And that's where she discovers the corpse of Cheryl Ann.
Yeah, that's right.
So she's killed, like Cheryl Ann's killed off straight away, whereas in the book, they just get back into the car and they drive back, and then they have a night out on the town, and then Laurie goes on her own way again, and then that's when the death scene happens with Cheryl Ann. It plays out very differently in that scene, and then Decker turns up.
Yes,
in the mask, the button mask kind of outfit, and he reveals him. He reveals himself to Laurie essentially, and he does it and the reason he's there is because he wants to. He knows
draw Boone out. Yeah,
he wants to pull Boone out. Yeah. And Boone does turn up, and he rescues Laurie, and Decker tries to kill him, doesn't he? But he realizes that.
Because he stabs Boone.
That's it.
Boone says, "Blades are no better than bullets," and then he has this realization that there's this weird monster universe that he never actually
knew existed,
aware of.
Yeah.
Existed, yeah. So he was now he's like got this other fixation of, I can kill a whole bunch of these other
these other fuckheads. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. I'm going to transfer myself to killing humans to killing these monsters instead.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he essentially kills breeders because he kills families.
Yes.
So then he's got the Nightbreed to kill now. So they're all breeding underground that he wants to kill them as well. So he's obviously got some kind of family, tribal, anti-family, anti-tribe fixation.
Yes, that's right. It's such a fascinating character.
Yeah.
So Boone escapes and he takes Laurie into Midian. Essentially, they get away, and by going down there, and so and this is where we get Rachel. They meet Rachel again, and she's trying to explain to Laurie that they're peaceful people, and we get that bit of back. Yeah. Is this where we get a bit of a backstory to the?
Yeah, the daughter touches Laurie and gives her a glimpse of their history. Right. Actually, she gives her the downloads the entire history of the Nightbreed.
Yeah, like download. It's like the Matrix.
I mean, I know it's explained better. Kind of, you have this whole series like it's an actual history of the breed.
Yep.
And how they were persecuted over the thousands and thousands of years, and how
that's it.
They've been forced to hide underground in the shadows and stuff.
That's right.
But
yeah. So and that's kind of a bit rushed over, but we get the gist. Like, they've been forced to go underground essentially and build a life away from humans. Because humans carry out their peaceful being. And the concept of Midian is that it's meant to be accepting of all shapes and sizes, different backgrounds, and it's a very kind of peaceful existence.
That's it.
Almost a utopia, really.
Boone keeps talking about it earlier on as Midian's where the monsters live.
Yeah.
And then I think it's Narcissus says that's where your sins are forgiven.
Yes.
And it's like a sanctuary. It's like it means something to different people.
Yeah.
I get.
Yeah.
So at the heart of it is a sanctuary for, a place that you can go to be accepted. So
yeah, that's right. Yeah. That's right. So the problem is that and from a Lylesburg point of view, is Boone broke the rules and he needs to be banished from Midian, and Laurie's happy to do that because at this stage she's human and doesn't see herself fitting in with the people that live in Midian, and she's still in love with Boone. So they kind of get banished from Midian. And then, but at the same time, Decker is aware that these creatures are underground because they need to be in darkness, and that they will get killed in sunlight, essentially. And but he still wants to pin, like he knows Boone's on the run, and he needs to still pin this serial killer thing on him because the body's disappeared. So, like, he basically goes to the motel place that Laurie's been staying at, and he kills everybody.
Yeah.
Hotel. Not that we see that, we just see the aftermath of the production. As Laurie and Boone turn up, and Boone says, "Why is it so quiet? It's weird." And she says, "I don't know. No idea." She kind of dismisses it, and he says, "I smell blood."
Yeah.
And that's hinting that he's turned as well. And then she goes into her room and starts just kind of grabbing some stuff, and then she notices this hole in the wall, and she kind of looks inside and is kind of horrified by what she sees, and she basically shouts out to Boone and says, "It's next door, go check out next door." And he goes in and he just sees these guys who must be there playing poker or something, but they're all dead and completely beyond belief. But because he sees the blood and the body everywhere, he starts to turn.
Yeah.
Laurie comes in and says, "What's going on?" He says, You've got to go now. Because he doesn't want her to see him in that form.
Yeah, that's right.
So she makes a run for it, as the police have been tipped by Decker, who's outside, to come up on the scene. And they basically turn up as they turn up as Boone transforms.
Boone's having a bit of a taste.
Yes, that's right.
Blood.
Yes.
Yeah, so he's covered in blood.
That's
and
right.
He's back to normal form, and then they just basically bust in and grab him and lock him up.
Yeah, so from the police's point of view, they don't see him in that form, do they? They don't see him as the vampire monster. They just see him as a normal guy, but completely in blood, and the aftermath of what Decker's created.
Yeah.
And so they just put 2 and 2 together and presume he's the one responsible.
Mm.
So then we. So he gets arrested, taken to prison, to jail, and Laurie. I can't remember. I think
the police are starting to attack. They're investigating Midian around that stage, and that's when the car they start fighting back.
Yeah, this is where we're introduced to. We'll put a pin on Laurie in a second because I feel like something happened to her and I forget something. But
yeah,
this is where we meet Eigerman. At this point, the captain for the first time, and he basically is told about these monsters and stuff by Decker, and he's like, okay, well, I'm too busy. I've got a press conference to deal with, but I will give you some of my cops to go and investigate. And he goes in one of the cells is this drunken priest, a guy called Asprey, and he basically goes, right, you go with them. He says, we need a God servant to come.
God on our side.
Yeah. To go and find out what's going on in Midian. Meanwhile, Laurie. Oh no, there we go. Laurie teams up with Rachel and Narcisse. That's right. They find her.
Yeah.
They attempt a prison break with Boone, and the 4 of them. And the
cops have gone to Midian, and they've dragged Bamford out, and Bamford has exploded, and then I think Narcissus blows up the cop car, and they go chasing after, looking for Boone or something.
Yeah, and that's right. Yeah, all this kind of happens. This is where it does. The movie gets a bit batshit crazy here because everything just kind of gets.
Oh, it turns into pure anarchy around this stage.
It really is. Yeah, that's it. The humans have turned into monsters. They're going nuts. They just want to liberate these people, these monsters.
Yeah,
just trying to fend for themselves. And this is where, as we said at the beginning, there is a slight difference between the theatrical cut and the director's cut, in that it's kind of showing stuff more from the monster's point of view, whereas the theatrical cut just kind of sees these guys going out to just destroy these monsters. And so they're just blowing the shit out of the place, and there's these big confrontation scenes that are happening, so Boone and the others return to help in the fight, to stand up against
the Sons of the Free.
Yes.
This weird ass sort of like bunch of pre-Trump supporters.
Yes.
Patriots,
That's right.
And they're fucking armed to the anal gland.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's crazy.
I know the director's cut makes a lot more of a meal out of the gun-loving thing because there's a lot of like phallic sort of gun stroking.
Yes.
And it really makes a mockery of the whole gun scene.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
Whereas I think the theatrical cut, they just were like, we're Sons of the Free. They're a bunch of fucking maniacs anyway, but they grab their guns and off they go.
Yes, that's right.
Kill the shit out of the Nightbreed.
That's
and so they rush back, don't they? And then they go, it's time to fight. So
that's right. They all team up, and they kind of and a big battle's about to take part. And the priest character Ashbury, he finds out that there's women and children in amongst the Nightbreed, and he tries to stop them going in. You can't go in there. He goes, they're kids. It doesn't matter if they're monsters. There's women and children. And Eichmann has none of it, and he basically beats Ashbury down.
Yeah.
And then Ashbury goes. Oh, did he meets up with Boone at this point? I think, or
he's downstairs. Oh, he's in the temple, one of the temple rooms.
Yeah, and he actually comes face to face with Baphomet at this point, doesn't he? He sees him, and he swears allegiance to this creature, and then he gets kind of burnt by him, by
Baphomet's blood.
Yeah, that's right. And he loses all his hair and becomes this weird kind of bald-looking entity.
Yeah.
But he's become one of them at this point as the Nightbreed. And then Boone then catches up with Lalsberg, and he said, and this is where Boone starts to really try and take control. And I found that this was came out of left field a little bit, because up to this point he was just kind of, I guess, just surviving. But this is the turning point of his character, where he then starts leading the group. And he turns to Lalsberg and says, like, is there a way that we can get Baphomet out? And Lalsberg says, yes, there's a way. And we don't ever see what that way is in the film, but in the book we do.
Yes.
Because Baphomet basically shreds himself apart and feeds himself into each of the Nightbreed. Yeah. So that they basically carry him with them. And then when they can reunite again, they can rebuild Baphomet again. Is the purpose, I guess, or the idea behind it.
The theatrical cut, I think, in the barn when they're all together, you do see Hessian Sachs with, and I'm assuming that's got parts of Baphomet with them.
Yeah.
Like them holding some things.
Okay, because it's never
like they're holding parts of Baphomet.
Yeah, how awesome is the Shuna Sassy character, by the way?
Oh yeah,
she's great. Like we see her, and she's like this kind of has these like quills, and she's very. The lady that played her, Christine McCorkindale, basically was told that she had to be sexual but quite dangerous. Or in the way she is, and these quills, she's a bit like a porcupine in defense, will throw these quills out to attack her prey. And it's interesting, the reason why I bring her up is the design of that in the drawings. So Clive Barker's initial drawing of her had these quills, and Pinhead, initially the way he originally drew Pinhead was that he had quills too, not pins, nails in him. So there's a lot more to their likeness than meets the eye, which is kind of cool.
Huh.
Anyway, so that was an aside. Sorry. Again, it just shows how cool these creatures are. And
yeah, it's a great creature design on her, actually.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So Boone is basically kind of saying, is there a way that we can get Baphomet out?
Yeah.
He says yes. So then Boone, then somehow we get introduced to these other creatures called the Berserkers, who are these kind of weird creatures.
Mad bastards.
Yeah, they're basically the creatures that are sent to like what is a mental asylum within, hence the name Berserkers. Within Midian, and Boone basically says we need to let the Berserkers go. Let's free them. And somehow he's aware of them, and it's never really explained. But in the book, obviously, by this point, he's spent a period of time living in Midian. So they kind of release them, and these are the creatures I was saying about, where these young guys were basically put in charge of creating them, and they basically kind of wanted them to be like almost like American football players in the sense that they're really stocky, kind of built, and they have like their mouths are kind of interesting, like they have this jaw kind of thing going on.
Yeah,
it's a pretty interesting design. And so like Boone basically kind of sets them off, and they set out to kind of just destroy this army that's descending upon them in order to try and save them. In the madness, we actually have Lalsberg is killed before he can kind of set them free. And this is interesting because in the film, like they're losing their leader, and this gives a good platform for Boone to step in and so it makes sense. In the book, Lalsberg is still alive at the end. He doesn't get killed, so it's a very interesting. I felt I felt like the film, in this instance, the film made more sense for Boone's character to fulfill that prophecy and be the one to lead them on.
Yeah, for sure.
And yeah, so Larsberg's killed off. Boone has to then release the berserkers, and as I said, get sent off. And then we get the big confrontation between Decker and Boone turning up. And Decker stabs him with this
right to the back with this ultra long knife.
Him through. That's right. And believing that that's killed him. And then and in that instance, Baphomet is there, and he basically says that is the end of Boone. The person that basically caused the destruction of Midian, as it has been foretold in the prophecies, now reborn as Cabal, and he kind of renames him. Or this is like a rebirth, essentially.
Exactly.
And then, and this is where he kind of comes out, and then he has that big confrontation with. Have I jumped a bit? I missed it. I think before that happens, sorry, he actually kills Decker, doesn't he? With using the whole what he's been impaled with, he impales Decker in that kind of embrace moment, as we hinted at earlier in what comes across as a very kind of sexual encounter.
Yeah, exactly.
And so Decker, the villain, is killed at this point. And then we get the rebirth scene of him coming as Cabal, and he says, I need you to, Baphomet says, I need you to take on and lead our people.
Find me.
Yeah, that's right. And rebuild a new city. And so everyone kind of disperses, essentially, and escapes. And the idea is that they will find each other, and they've been led by the prophecy that this person called Cabal will reunite them.
Yeah.
And this is where we then in the director's cut, we have the bit where Boone kind of escapes with Laurie, and she basically says, take me with you, and he says, I can't, I have to do this thing, I'll come back for you. And she's like, oh yeah, when I'm 90 years old?
Yeah, that's right.
And that's in the book too, like you said at the beginning. This exactly. Book, it plays out, and she basically turns on him and just says, all right, well, fuck off then, and he goes to go, and she just uses that as an excuse to then stab herself, and he wants him to bite her, essentially, to kind of reawaken her and turn her so that she could live with him and be with him, because that's all she cares for. She loves him.
Yeah, exactly.
And he is reluctant, but he does so. And there's a moment where he thinks it's too late that to have turned her, but then she inevitably turns. We get your, as you said, Gone with the Wind moment at the end, where they embrace in the as the sun rises, and they know they have this mission to continue. And we had that shot, as you said, in the barn of these people then saying they're going to get rescued by this Cabal character.
Yeah.
To fulfill the prophecy and reunite them once more. And that's how it ends. Obviously, the big difference between this and the theatrical cut is that we then we have the priest character Ashbury finding the corpse of Decker. And he at this point is pissed off with Baphomet, and he swears vengeance upon Baphomet and the Nightbreed, and he basically presses Baphomet's wound, and he heals him, brings him back to life.
Yeah.
And the two of them are set off to kind of obviously pursue Nightbreed. So they obviously were hoping to use that as a slasher, as means to use this Decker character to come back. That doesn't happen in the director's cut. It ends exactly like the book ends. Decker is dead; he's no more, and we get this hint of what will become. Where will these creatures go to? How will they rebuild themselves? which I find quite fascinating.
It's a real Exodus moment, isn't it? It's there's so many like little parallels and stuff going on with this, of the persecuted trying to find their own Exodus now. They've been like, they've almost had their own Holocaust essentially, and now they're just looking for their Israel. So
that's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Yeah,
There's so much biblical references in this. And
yes,
I think at one point Barker did say he uses a lot of Bible or biblical references in a lot of his work, and then he came out and refuted that he ever said that, I think. But so there's a lot of contention whether that's true or not.
Yeah.
But like you see it, and particularly the whole Sodom and Gomorrah thing, and
definitely, and then
the town being burnt to a crisp, and and them having to rebuild again. To me, it's clearly evident. So that's how the film kind of comes out. That's how it bows out. So you spoke about how we've already kind of touched on this a little bit, but just for the sake of kind of bowing out of our podcast, you spoke about how this film had a lot of meaning to you. You said that you do prefer the theatrical cut in many ways. Do you think that's purely because you were so immersed in that at the time that it has? I think so.
I saw it as a different entity than the actual book. So, but I did feel it was a tighter ride. I felt there was a lot of stuff that was in the director's cut that essentially, as I said before, kind of was doubling up on a few things here and there. Like it was over explaining, or it just didn't seem to fit. So there was just something quite, I don't know, it was something not quite concise about the original cut that I felt it had a real wild ride to it.
Sure.
And so I kind of like that one. But I mean, I do like getting the extra bits out of it. It's kind of nice. I'm sure I'll get used to it after a time, because it's probably me just not getting used to it as well.
Yeah.
I've seen that other version so many times.
Yeah,
that now I'm seeing the new version with the extra 20 minutes and just going, I don't know, because it almost like, for instance, the Laurie character, she's a lot more fleshed out, and you get more of her character explained.
Yeah,
and same as a lot of the other characters, actually, that you get a bit more of them explained. And I kind of sometimes I feel like you don't really need to over-explain. It's sometimes you kind of. I was left with the other version. I was left to read a lot more into it myself.
Yeah,
and also because I read the book, that I kind of felt like I knew them anyway. So
it's interesting, because I get exactly what you're saying, but I think I like this version a little bit more. And I don't know whether, from my point of view, I don't know whether that's because I read the book really recently and then watched the movie. So I kind of watched it going, this is really faithful to the book, and obviously it's written by Barker, he's directing this, so it's faithful to his vision. And so I enjoyed that whole process. I found it enjoyable watching the richness of the monsters a bit more, because they are you get to see a lot more of Midian, I felt, and the world that's beneath. And I enjoyed that. I wanted to see more of that, if anything, and experience that. And that's why the idea of a sequel fascinates me even more, because I'd love to see these creatures. And now that Midian's destroyed, how do these creatures fend for themselves again? They're in the open a little bit more, and how do they survive? I would love to see that journey. And it was, to me, I loved re-seeing Cronenberg as Decker. I really enjoyed his character, and I could see from the producer's point of view why that character was so appetizing, and you would want to maybe do something with that character, because at the time, it's 1990, the slasher genre is starting to burn out a little bit, and they may have seen this as a potential avenue to reawaken that a little bit more with his.
Yeah.
So it was interesting, very interesting. So, all right. So before we bow out, you've obviously got a love from the original. Would you recommend either the original or the new one to anyone that's not ever entered the world of Nightbreed before?
Do I have to make a choice of which one?
No, you don't. Either or. Would you recommend if no one's ever seen Nightbreed?
Yeah, I'd recommend it in a heartbeat. I still think it's one of my favorite films of all time. Cool. I have a definite love of it, and I will revisit it every so often. And you know what? If the extra hour version comes out, I'll bloody watch it. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I probably will too.
I almost went to see the Cabal cut. Actually, I remember it was showing at Melbourne.
Yeah, that was Melbourne. The sandwich in between. Yeah, so that's where a lot of the
I almost planned to actually see it because, like as I said, I really like this film. I think it's one of it's up there in my top 20 films of all time. So it's
wow.
There's something about it that just really stuck with me with this film. So I'd recommend it in a heartbeat. I think it's a great film.
I would too. Yeah, I really enjoyed watching it. Like I said, it's been a long time, and I keep emphasizing that. But it's made me regret not watching it anytime sooner. You know, I suddenly realized how much I really did enjoy the film.
Yeah,
and I was just like,
I was often because you know what, it's way ahead of its time.
Yes,
and I mean the special effects aren't the actual CGI effects aren't amazing.
No,
but the real time effects are amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the matte paintings are just beautiful as well. Yeah. Some of the matte stuff is so like it's like as good as Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark and all of those ILM stuff was at that particular time. So no, it's great. It's a timeless film.
Yeah, I agree. As I was watching it, I was just like, there is a reason this has a cult following. It's not one of those films where cults kind of come and go, and you know, you hear about, what am I trying to say? When people hear about a cult film, they often will go and, I'll check that out, and they come away sorely disappointed because the label attached to it. But this feels bigger than that. It feels like it deserves to be bigger than a cult. It wants a wider audience, I feel. I do. If you haven't seen it, I really recommend people go out and check it out. It's its own beast as well. Yeah. I don't know of another film that's like it, and it touches on so many social issues that are still relevant today. That I think that's why, as you said, it is time.
Even more so.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Cool,
man. All right, I think on that note, we're going to bow out. As we said, we were talking about Nightbreed as its 30th anniversary is being celebrated this year. Do check it out. And as I said, a big shout out to the people behind the Hellraiser podcast too. If you want to hear a bit more on that, if you are a fan of Nightbreed and want to hear a deeper discussion, go check them out. They're an awesome crew. Until then, I'm the host of this podcast, Storm Muerte, and I was joined by Miles Davies. Until next time, goodbye.
Bye.
You're listening to the Surgeons of Horror podcast. Music supplied by Peter Nezik. For more discussions or podcasts, head over to surgeonsofhorror.com or head over to our Facebook and Twitter sites for the latest news and updates.